You wrote some code, Jenna. That doesn't make you a founder. It makes you a vendor. My uncle Victor said that without looking up from his desk. He was signing something. I could see the Apex Logistics letterhead from where I was standing. The letter of intent. $8.2 million. A deal that could not legally close without my signature on a document I had no intention of signing. I had driven 40 minutes to his office in Brentwood on a Tuesday morning in February to tell him exactly that. He hadn't offered me a seat. I need you to sign the IP assignment by Friday, he said. We'll get you a bonus, $10,000. I want 5% equity. He finally looked up, and then he laughed, the kind of laugh that's mostly air, the kind that says you're not worth a real reaction. You don't get equity. You're support staff. You always have been. Drew and Craig built this company. You just wrote some code. I didn't say anything. I stood there in his corner office with the view of the Cumberland River behind him, and I felt something go very quiet inside me. Not sad, not angry, just clear, like the moment right before a thunderstorm when everything goes perfectly still. I'll need to review the contract, I said. He waved his hand toward the door. It's already drafted, just sign it. I left without picking up the pen he slid across his desk. People always want to know why I stayed as long as I did. Why I spent 5 years grinding myself down for a company that paid me like a temp and treated me like furniture. The honest answer is that I didn't understand what was being done to me while it was being done. Victor Harmon is my father's older brother. When I was 12, my parents were killed by a drunk driver on I-40 just east of Cookeville on a Sunday evening in October, on their way back from visiting my aunt. There were no other relatives who could take me in, and Victor stepped forward. I grew up in his house in Nashville, went to school with his sons Drew and Craig, sat at his Thanksgiving table every year, called his wife by her first name. He paid for my first 2 years at Vanderbilt, then sat me down and told me I needed to take out loans for the rest because I needed to understand the value of what I was getting. Drew and Craig had their full tuition paid every semester, without a single conversation about it. I graduated with a degree in information systems and $34,000 in private loan debt, and I was genuinely grateful, which tells you everything you need to know about how completely he had trained me to accept less than I was owed. I joined Harmon Freight Solutions at 24. The company had been started by my grandfather in the late 80s, passed to Victor 15 years ago, and was being nominally prepared for Drew and Craig to inherit someday. Nominally, because Drew was reliably 40 minutes late to his own department meetings and had a habit of agreeing to client deliverables he then forgot to calendar. Craig had, in the 2 years before I arrived, expensed a weekend fishing trip as a carrier relationship retreat and once sent the wrong shipper documents to 3 different clients on the same day. The business itself was solid. Freight brokerage, connecting shippers with trucking carriers across the Southeast Corridor. Good margins if you ran it well. The problem was that nobody was running it well. When I got there, every load was tracked in a web of Excel spreadsheets stored on a shared drive that hadn't been properly backed up since before the pandemic. We were double booking carriers. We were losing loads in transit because nobody had a real-time view into anything. 2 of our largest retail clients had already sent formal complaints. One was threatening to go to a competitor. I spent the first 3 months doing nothing but documenting what existed. Then I started building. I want to be precise about what I built, because it matters to everything that comes later. I built a proprietary freight management platform from nothing. Custom route optimization, real-time carrier GPS integration, automated load matching that could process 3 times our daily volume in a fraction of the time, a client-facing portal with live shipment status and document access, invoice reconciliation that had been taking our billing team 12 hours a week now ran in under 2. I worked nights. I worked weekends. I skipped a trip to Colorado I'd been planning with friends since the previous spring. I sat in the server room in the basement of our office building on August afternoons in Nashville. And if you have never been in Nashville in August, the heat is not weather, it is a presence. And I debugged API integration errors until 2 in the morning because we had a major new client onboarding the next day and nobody else knew how any of it worked. Victor classified me as an independent technology consultant, 1099 status, $55,000 a year, no health insurance, no 401(k) matching, no paid time off, no short-term disability, no profit sharing. When I asked about benefits early on, he said, "Jenna, consultants don't get benefits. That's the trade-off for the flexibility." There was no flexibility. I worked the same hours as every full W-2 employee in the building. I attended every staff meeting. I followed every internal policy. I was, in every practical sense, an employee. But on paper, to save Victor roughly $42,000 a year in payroll taxes, employer contributions, and benefits costs, I was a vendor. Drew was drawing $165,000 a year plus profit sharing. Craig was at $148,000. Both had full benefits, company-matched retirement, and quarterly bonuses tied to revenue growth. Revenue that had jumped 68% in the 2 years since my platform went live. Victor gave them each a $30,000 bonus this spring after our best quarter on record. He gave me a gift card to a steakhouse on Broadway and said I had really been part of the team. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried for about 8 minutes. Then I went home and started the next sprint. Looking back, I can see the specific moments where I should have walked. There was the afternoon a major client's entire load manifest failed to sync 20 minutes before their cutoff window, and Drew called me. Not anyone in operations, me, on my personal cell, because he was about to get on a call with the client and didn't know how to explain the delay. I fixed it remotely from a restaurant bathroom while my friend's birthday dinner waited. Drew told the client the team had proactively resolved a system anomaly. He sent me a thumbs up emoji afterward. There was the client presentation where Craig confidently told a room of logistics directors that our platform used something he called predictive freight intelligence, which he had apparently invented on the spot. I had to navigate the next 45 minutes of technical questions while Craig nodded along like he had a single idea what was being discussed. Victor pulled me aside afterward and said I should let Craig lead the technical narrative more. Craig's technical narrative was fiction. Mine was the actual product. I stayed because Victor was the closest thing to a father I had left. Because my grandfather had built Harmon Freight with his hands and it felt, in some way I couldn't fully articulate, like staying was honoring that. And because I kept believing that if I just proved myself a little more completely, the recognition would come. I didn't understand yet that Victor was not waiting for me to prove myself. He had already decided what I was worth. He was simply counting on me never to figure that out. The morning I finally understood that recognition was never coming arrived in the break room at 7:45 on a Wednesday. I was early, as always. Drew came in 23 minutes late, holding a $16 smoothie, dropped into a chair across from me, glanced at my open laptop, and said, "Can you pull the Q3 retention report before 10? Victor needs it for the Apex call." I said sure, because I always said sure. He didn't say thank you. He scrolled his phone. "What's the Apex call?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just a check-in. Some freight company out of Atlanta sniffing around. Victor's been chatting with them." 6 weeks later, I found out what the check-in actually was. Victor had been in acquisition talks with Apex Logistics for 4 months. He had not told me. The letter of intent was for $8.2 million. The Apex legal team had completed their preliminary due diligence and identified the proprietary freight management platform as the primary driver of the company's valuation. Without it, based on physical assets and existing carrier contracts alone, they assessed Harmon Freight at under $400,000. The platform I had built, alone, on a 1099 contract with no intellectual property transfer clause. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something I should have caught. But when you trust someone the way I trusted Victor, when you are 12 years old and handed to someone in the worst moment of your life, and they take you in and you grow up calling their house home, you don't go through their legal documents looking for gaps. He had handed me that contract across his kitchen table 4 days before my first official day and said it was just the standard stuff. We keep things simple here. I was 24. I believed him. I pulled my original contract from the folder I kept on my personal laptop. I read it clause by clause, slowly, for the first time since I had signed it. It defined my scope of work. It established my hourly rate structure. It had a non-disclosure agreement and a section about invoicing schedules. There was no intellectual property transfer clause. Not a sentence, not a word. I sat with that for a long time. Under United States copyright law, the default rule is that the person who creates something owns it. A W-2 employee's work product is considered work for hire. It belongs to the employer automatically, without any additional agreement. But an independent contractor operates differently. Unless a contract explicitly assigns IP rights to the hiring party, the contractor retains ownership of whatever they create. Victor had been so focused on saving money by avoiding W-2 status that he had never paid a lawyer to draft the clause that would have cost him nothing to include. He hadn't bought my work. He had been using it for 5 years without realizing he needed my permission to do so. I called Helena Cruz the following morning. She was a technology and IP attorney I had connected with through a Vanderbilt alumni network. We had met for coffee twice, and I liked her because she never wasted words. I drove to her office on Charlotte Avenue and sat across from her and slid my contractor agreement across the table without saying anything first. She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she set it down and looked at me with an expression I recognized. The particular focus of someone encountering something better than they expected. "He didn't use an IP attorney," she said. "He said lawyers were overhead. He's about to learn what overhead is actually protecting him from." She tapped the contract. "You own the platform, every line of code, every interface, every integration, every data structure. All of it. Legally, Harmon Freight Solutions has been operating your intellectual property under an implied license." She paused. "And you can revoke it." "I don't want to sue him," I said. "I want to start a company." She looked at me steadily. "Then let's start a company." We filed the Articles of Organization for Harmon Tech Solutions LLC that same afternoon. Helena filed for copyright registration on the platform with the U.S. Copyright Office, expedited processing. While we waited the 72 hours for confirmation, I went to work every day as normal. I answered emails. I resolved a carrier routing issue for a client in Memphis. I updated the platform's reporting dashboard. I sat in a staff meeting where Craig presented Q3 numbers that my system had generated and nodded along like I had all the time in the world. Victor called me into his office on Thursday and slid an IP assignment agreement across his desk. 8 pages. Standard language, transferring all rights in the platform to Harman Freight Solutions, retroactive to my start date. End of business Friday, he said. Apex needs the clean title confirmed before they'll move to the next phase. What's the compensation? I asked. $10,000 bonus, I told you. I want 5% of the acquisition proceeds. He took his glasses off slowly the way he did when he was performing patients. Jenna, you are a consultant. Consultants receive fees, not equity. That is the nature of the arrangement. The arrangement that kept me off health insurance for 5 years. Something shifted in his face. I took care of you when nobody else would. I gave you a home. I put you through school. Don't make me regret that. And there it was. The ledger he had been keeping since I was 12 years old. The debt that never had a balance, that only grew, that was designed to grow. Designed to be the ceiling I bumped against every time I tried to ask for what I had earned. I'll think about it, I said. There's nothing to think about. His voice dropped. Sign it by Friday or we'll find a different arrangement. I nodded. I walked back to my desk. I texted Helena 2 words. We're ready. The Apex due diligence meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the Westin downtown. A conference room on the 4th floor with a view of Broadway and a catered breakfast nobody was going to enjoy. Victor, Drew, Craig, their M&A attorney, and the 2-person Apex acquisition team. I was not on the guest list. I was never intended to be there. I was the vendor. I was the support staff. I was, in Victor's accounting of the situation, a problem that had already been handled. I walked in at 9:14 with Helena Cruz beside me and a leather portfolio containing a freshly issued federal copyright registration. Victor saw me the moment I came through the door. He went so still that the Apex representative, who had been mid-sentence, trailed off and looked to see what had stopped him. Drew was standing at the coffee station. He turned around and just held his cup. Craig, to his credit, at least sat down. I apologize for the interruption, I said. I'm Jenna Harman. I'm the developer of the freight management platform that forms the basis of this acquisition. I set the copyright registration on the conference table. Helena Cruz, my attorney. She has information that Apex's legal counsel should review before this transaction proceeds. Helena was calm and methodical. She laid out the 1099 classification. She presented the contractor agreement with the absent IP clause highlighted. She explained the copyright registration, dated 3 days prior. She explained in plain language that Harman Freight Solutions had been operating the platform under an implied license that was now formally revoked, effective immediately, pending renegotiation with the legal IP owner. The Apex legal representative, a woman in a gray blazer who had been taking careful notes, picked up my original contractor agreement and read the highlighted section twice. Then she looked at Victor. Mr. Harman. She was classified as a 1099 contractor for the duration of her work on this platform? It was a tax classification, Victor said. His voice had gone thin in a way I had never heard before. She functioned as an employee in every practical sense. We can resolve any ambiguity in the contract is unambiguous, Helena said pleasantly. We'd like a brief recess, Victor's M&A attorney said. Of course, Helena said. We'll be right here. Victor stood and looked at me across the table with an expression I had never seen on his face in my entire life. Not anger. Not disappointment. Something closer to recognition, the specific look of a person understanding for the first time that they have badly miscalculated. He lowered his voice. Jenna, this is family. You don't do this to family. You classified me as a vendor, I said. I'm acting like one. He left the room. Drew followed him. Craig looked at me for a moment before he stood up, and there was something in his face that wasn't quite anger, more like the exhaustion of a person who has suspected for a long time that this day was coming. During the recess, the Apex legal representative asked me 2 technical questions about platform architecture. I answered them. She nodded. She didn't look at where Victor had been sitting. When the meeting resumed, I walked the Apex team through Harman Tech Solutions' licensing proposal. 3 options. A flat license, a revenue share arrangement, or a full acquisition of the platform from my company directly. For 40 minutes, the conversation was entirely between me, Helena, and the 2 people from Apex. Victor's attorney made 2 objections that Helena addressed without breaking her cadence. Victor himself said 4 words the entire time, "This isn't over and we'll be in touch," directed at no one in particular, before he walked out. He grabbed my arm in the hallway, not hard, but firmly enough. I will bury you in legal fees. You don't have the resources to fight me. I looked at his hand until he let go. You saved $42,000 a year by misclassifying me, I said. Over 5 years, that's just over $200,000 you kept that should have gone to benefits and employer taxes. Because of that choice, I now own the asset you were trying to sell for $8 million. I picked up my portfolio. You didn't save money, Victor. You handed me the company. I walked to the elevator with Helena. The doors closed. I leaned back against the wall and exhaled for what felt like the first time in half a decade. What followed wasn't clean. Legal disputes with family never are. But here is what happened factually. Apex passed on acquiring Harmon Freight Solutions. Without the platform, their independent assessment dropped the company's value to $380,000. Equipment, trucks, and existing carrier relationships. Victor had been counting on the $8.2 million to fund his retirement and a beach property in Destin he had already picked out. He didn't get either. He filed suit claiming breach of contractor agreement and tortious interference with a business relationship. Helena had his complaint dismissed on amended pleadings within 11 weeks. The contractor agreement had no non-compete clause. He had not wanted to pay a lawyer to draft one. An IRS audit followed. Someone, and I genuinely do not know who, filed a tip with the agency's worker misclassification reporting line. The audit covered 5 years of my contractor payments against the standards for employment classification, behavioral control, financial control type of relationship. The findings were conclusive. The back taxes, employer contributions, and penalties totaled $193,000. Victor paid. He had no choice. Apex came back to me 8 weeks after the due diligence meeting, not to Victor. They licensed the platform from Harmon Tech Solutions for $1.85 million upfront, plus a 4.2% annual royalty on revenue generated through the system. The wire cleared on a Thursday in late April. I was sitting in the parking garage outside my bank, just sitting in the car with the engine off, looking at my phone. I sat there for a while. Drew lost his profit sharing. Without the platform's competitive differentiation, the company started shedding clients. Victor had to let their operations staff go down to a skeleton crew. Last I heard, they were managing loads in spreadsheets again, which is where they were when I arrived. Craig sold the company truck. He took a job at a different freight broker in Murfreesboro. I heard that through someone we both know. I didn't feel triumphant about it. Exactly. Craig taught me how to drive in an empty church parking lot on a Saturday afternoon when I was 15. But I also watched him collect a 6-figure salary for 5 years on work that existed because of something he couldn't have built and couldn't have explained to a client. Consequences are rarely targeted with precision, but they do eventually arrive. Victor called me twice after the settlement closed. I let both calls go to voicemail. The second message was 3 minutes long. He said I had betrayed the family. He said my grandfather would be ashamed. He said I had proven that some people just don't know how to be grateful. I listened to that message sitting at my desk at Harmon Tech Solutions, which occupies a suite on the second floor of a renovated building in East Nashville. There's a coffee shop below us. The light comes in from the east in the mornings, and it's good light. The kind that makes you feel like the day is actually starting. I have 4 employees. We're onboarding a 3rd logistics client this quarter. I carry my own health insurance and a 401(a), and I have a line item in my budget for paid time off that I actually use. My grandfather built Harmon Freight with nothing but a commercial driver's license and a phone book, and the belief that honest work eventually speaks for itself. I think he would have recognized what I did. I think he would have understood it in the exact way his son never will. Victor raised me to believe I owed him more than I could ever repay, that the home he gave me at 12 years old was a permanent ledger entry that canceled any claim I might make on fairness or recognition. He used the worst thing that ever happened to me as leverage so quietly and so consistently that for 5 years I never felt it pressing down on me. I thought it was just the weight of family. I thought that was what love felt like. The contractor status was designed to keep me cheap and invisible. What it actually did was give me legal ownership of everything I ever built there. He tried to make me nothing on paper. He forgot that on paper was exactly where it mattered. I am Jenna Harmon. I built what that company was worth. I own it. I always did.